Pam, thanks for joining us on the Creative Leaders podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you both for having me.
No problem at all. We're just going to start off, as we always do, by asking you to tell us why you do what you do. So not so much what you do or how you do it, but why you do what you do.
Do you know, I've thought about this for a long time, and I think it is what I think now is just like a natural progression of like where I was heading in my kind of career and kind of personal development. Because I kind of started off in my career in broadcast television and then feature film and commercials, and then found my way into this. I think I get bored very, very easily. I get very excited about stuff, and then very quickly I want to like kind of move on to like kind of what's the next thing. And I think actually as fast moving as like TV and film can be, it wasn't as fast moving enough for me, and I didn't have enough autonomy like within what I was doing. So when this opportunity came up, this role that I do is an opportunity for me to fulfill a lot of different aspects to my personality and my career progression that I just wouldn't have had the opportunity, to do. And it's also it's hugely rewarding. And I think especially in the creative industries, everybody kind of looks at that title, managing director, and they go, oh, that's the person that's going to tell us we can't do this and we can't do that and we can't do the next thing. And that's not how I found it, and it's certainly not how I approach it at all. It's the opposite. Like why I do this is because I want to give us the wherewithal to be able to do all the exciting stuff that we want to do, and it's in my power and my remit to do that, and that's so exciting, as well as being slightly scary at the same time.
Now, that's really interesting, because it's interesting that you mention the role of managing director and what that means. Because we've spoken to directors, like managing directors and EPs and stuff in this podcast before, and they quite often say it means a different thing to different studios, different companies, and things like that. What would you say is involved in your role as managing director? What's that kind of day-to-day look like?
For me, there's a couple of like analogies that always kind of come to mind. I think if you're like a completer, if you like a set of tasks, do those tasks, complete that thing, and then move on to the next thing, and you get that little kind of endorphin hit, something's happened, or I've completed something, then a managing director role probably not quite for you, because the way that I would probably describe things is I've got, basically your job is to look objectively and to keep, your an overarching, kind of look at the business, the studio, as an entity, and that's everything from, strategy, sales, operations, resource, talent, all of the stuff, direction, planning, everything. But it's also like on a day-to-day, it's like moving aspects of each one of those individual points on just a wee bit more, so if it's like the sales part of my role or the strategy part of my role, maybe what I'll be doing is I'll be doing something for one of the conferences that we're going to, and I'll be doing a reach out on that, kind of, that's not a job that I'm going to be able to do and then get an instant that's done. That's something that's going to feed into the strategy much further down the line. So someone described it to me once as like pushing various amounts of jelly up various hills. One time.
Sounds terrible.
I don't know. It depends how much you like jelly. But yeah, it's the old spinning plates one. But it's not quite that. Because you're actually, I think when you're when you're hands-on, producing or line producing or project managing, I can see the plate analogy does work because you've got lots of things that you're trying, for not to smash. But when you're an MD, you're actually you're trying to progress things, with this overarching kind of plan that that you've got, hopefully yourself and your business partner or other like kind of leads within your company, and you're trying to get that goal, on a higher level, so you've always got those bigger goals in mind, as well as keeping all the other stuff kind of running kind of day to day. So yeah, it's multitasking, multi kind of different thought processes going on at lots of different times, but it's very exciting. I love it.
Yeah, I mean that. So to kind of dive into that a bit deeper, is it your kind of role then? Do you look at things like marketing strategies and campaigns and sales and inside of that, as well as kind of overseeing, say, like the budgeting and stuff like that?
Yeah, so Kev and I, like, on the kind of like business like strategy, progression, marketing, we very much like kind of like come together on that, a lot of the time. So Kev, my business partner, who's is Revenant's creative director, we're very much like kind of a kind of team, when it kind of comes to that. Certain aspects of the sales, he's also like kind of fantastic at, and then I'll do like kind of various other aspects. I think like strategy perspective, again, that's something that we're growing out as we get a bit bigger, but it's something that's it's a big focus of mine, is like like looking at, because we work cross sector as well, so there's different aspects to our business. So we're not just selling into one sector. We do themed entertainment, we do games, we do broadcast, we do film. It's and each of those like sectors is almost like its own like strategy. So as we've grown, and as the strategies move out, so games was a big push for us last year, and then it continues, and that it kind of took quite a lot of effort, and then we kind of look at that, we're now looking at themed entertainment, for example. How do we we grow in that? So that's a kind of a big part of my like kind of focus. I'm also, because of my background, I do have quite an operational, head, on my shoulders. So I am looking at bids, I am looking at, schedules, and, and budget, and, and financials. It's a big part of my focus, because it's something that Kev doesn't, he's always aware of it, but it's not what, it's not what floats his boat, it's not where his focus needs to be. But it's incredibly important, because the bigger we get, the more important that becomes. So it's kind of, it's a team effort, and then it's like going back to what you said at the beginning, where different studios, depending, and different people will operate in this role in different ways, that lead into their strengths or their interests, or just the makeup of of their studio. You just have to kind of like roll up your sleeves and work out what's best to get your studio where you want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. You made an interesting point there, talking about the kind of recent push into games, but also different different areas that the studio is looking to focus on: themed entertainment, broadcast, that kind of thing. How is there a sort of priority that you put on certain things, or is there, how do you kind of approach that? I guess I guess kind of what you were saying, there are different strategies for those different sort of different key verticals that the studio's working on.
Yeah, I think it's about, I think it there's different aspects to that. So so one of the things that's really key to us as a studio is our focus on team and people. And Revenant is very much a studio that is about its team, and its and its permanent staff presence, and those members of the team are just are so important and are a fundamental part of what makes us Revenant. So rather than us being a collective or a studio that's a few kind of key creatives and then we just hire in, that's not really what we are. We are about kind of building a proper kind of team and a proper kind of studio. Proper is not the right word, but that's the kind of it's a culture, it's a studio, it's a team. It's about being bigger than the sum of your parts and all those really cheesy things. But a big part of that is us actually talking to the team and saying, because they're artists. We're artists. That's what we do. We're artists and we're storytellers. And actually kind of talking to them and saying, what do you want? What do you want to do? What would you like to see us kind of do? And Kev and I know what we'd like to do, and and we'll feed that into our kind of strategy going forward. But what do you guys want to do? And we got a lot of feedback of people saying they really would love to do games trailers and and cinematics and do more work in that kind of area. We knew that we wanted to push and do some stuff for Netflix, and we wanted to kind of really build on kind of building the kind of the broadcast and film stuff up to the next level. We knew we also wanted to kind of really kind of push the brand side of things and the commercials, and also technically within the studio we were also talking to the team about what direction did they want to kind of move in, creative stylized, pushing the kind of the CG pipeline, procedural, all of that kind of stuff, building in character. We brought in our head of animation a couple of years ago. That's been transformative for the studio. We didn't really do character animation before that in-house. We do now. So it's kind of kind of building that out, and then all of that then leads into us then thinking, right, how practically does that work? Right, okay, well, what can we practically focus on? Have we got anything to take that we can build a strategy for, kind of getting into games? And we had done the Iron Sail project. We'd done some really other nice creative work that lended itself, into that market. And then Valorant from Riot Games came along at the right time, and we thought, that's brilliant, what a fantastic IP. Was a really interesting project. It was completely different looking from anything that we'd kind of done before, but it was a really great jumping point for us to say, as a studio, because a lot of the stuff that had been on our portfolio before was very dark and moody, and and you could have been forgiven to think, all right, that's their kind of that's their kind of thing, and that's what they do. But actually, right at the heart of it, it's what we do is really, really creative work to a really, really high standard, and that's what we hold ourselves to. So regardless of what that creative is, the creative and the idea is part of what we are. So whether that's something that's really kind of dark and moody, or whether it's kind of something that's kind of that's inspired by anime, like the kind of Valorant trailer, whatever that may be. But yeah, all of that information hopefully feeds into the strategy so that we can push the studio in a direction that's going to be commercially viable, because we're always looking at kind of the kind of what's going on in the world and what's going on in these different areas, but also creatively viable for the studio, that's going to keep everybody interested and being passionate and doing great work, and and pushing myself and Kev in a direction that we want to as well. So yeah, that's quite a long-winded response to your question, Steve. Sorry.
No, I think that's great. It's kind of what you're sort of mentioning there. I kind of wanted to ask as well about taking games, for example. I wanted to kind of ask about that, and it's a hugely competitive industry. Even Scotland alone has a great animation scene that's working in game trailers. So I'd love to kind of touch on that. But I also kind of wanted to sort of look at a practical example of, if you're sort of sitting down saying, okay, the team really want to work in game trailers, that would be awesome. What's the kind of practical approach to building out a strategy for that? Is it simply a case of saying, well, let's start getting in touch with some developers, let's start going to GDC, or is there kind of more to, to building out a strategy to move into a sort of new area?
I think you need to do lots and lots of research. So really, like, and that can be like kind of like fact finding missions, going to speak to people, reaching out to people. There's a big kind of push in making connections. So, and if you are moving into something that's maybe not an industry that you know has been your bread and butter, or at least you've been involved in from maybe the start of your studio, it is, you are kind of, you're at a kind of slight disadvantage, because you're actually having to work out how does this actually work. So like if I'm trying to sell, who am I even selling to? Who's going to buy from us, and trying to navigate that and work out that. So we did a lot of fact finding. We also have an agent in North America, who helps us and makes connections for us, and kind of introduces us to kind of lots of people, which is great. So initially we kind of we did that, but we also looked inward as well. So we were looking at ourselves and saying, well, like you say, there is a massive amount of competition. Some people doing fantastic work the world over, and lots in Scotland. But that's a good thing, because, you're kind of known as a nation, for doing, great work in that sphere. So actually that's a good thing. The other thing as well is to kind of look at like what we as a studio can bring to it that's different. So and looking at maybe where some people might think a weakness, actually look at that as a strength. So by that, like one example I can think of is like, we do work cross sector, so our work's quite varied. So it's not like, we can go to Blizzard and go, oh, hi, Blizzard, here's our games reel that's like 3 hours long, with, all these like kind of, and everything that you'll want from, a partner in it. That wasn't going to be us. But what we do have is we have lots and lots of brand experience. So because we've done, ads and digital content in that space, and essentially, what is a games trailer? Well, it's an advert, isn't it? It's an advert for, a brand. Really, if you want to kind of boil it down, you're selling into that. But we also we're storytellers, and we're storytellers in short form content, which in itself is, its own art form. To tell a story in something very, very short, is really I think is really skillful, and stands out as a fantastic plus in that area. So you're kind of looking at all those things, and all of a sudden you're kind of thinking to yourself, actually, if we sell ourselves forward in that way, that's an attractive prospect, because part of like kind of what we do is like absorb ourselves in brands to really understand them, absorb ourselves in stories to really understand it, so as we can bring a narrative like kind of through. And all of that's really, really attractive, in the games industry when you boil it down, because you're, in a games trailer, you're trying to basically instantly pull people in, going, this is an amazing story, these are amazing characters, I want to invest, 20, 30 hours of my life in that, and 70 quid of my hard-earned cash, into that like kind of game. And that's, and that was a big part of like kind of where our, experience lay. So when we were kind of bringing that in and saying, well, look, we've done these things, before, we really kind of pushed that forward. And, we're also, like, because there is this like kind of like marketing edge to what we do, we're really good with clients, and we get a lot of them who come to us and go, look, we want something, but we don't know what it is. We like what we've seen here. That's really cool. like, can you, like, what can we do? We think we want this, what do you think? Here's how much money we've got, here's how much value we place in this, what can be done? And we've had great success from clients that we've had those conversations with. Iron Sail, was one of them. Oakley was another one. And great things have like kind of came out of that. So yeah, so it's about like kind of figuring out what makes you different. If you just go off to GDC and go, oh, I'm just going to stand about in some hotel lobbies and speak to whoever I want to and hand out some cards, it's not going to work. You're better having 5 really well researched meetings with people that that know people or are actually you're going to get something or might be interested in it, than 100 meetings with random people that that you're just kind of like throwing mud at the wall and see what comes back. So yeah, that's probably what I would say was our strategy there.
That's so interesting, actually. I never even thought about that approach of sort of bringing your previous experience of brand and commercial work into that game space, which could really pay off when all these sort of big developers and publishers all want to move into live service games and all have the next Fortnite, and they're all sort of bringing in Coca-Cola and all this, and so you start tying in brands to their game trail. That is interesting, actually. So kind of jumping back then to the studio side of things, where we're going to sort of touch upon what kind of trends are you seeing, emerging trends in your industry for animation, motion graphic design. What kind of trends are you seeing or foresee in the industry that you're excited about? Obviously, we all know about AI and stuff like that, but is there anything that you see coming down the line that's kind of interesting?
I think that we've got a place at the moment in the mainstream where people in the West, because like let's not forget, like that in Japan and China and Korea, adult animation has been there since the dawn of kind of like modern times, and I think what's really exciting at the moment is like the kind of mainstream uptake and excitement in stylized adult animation and storytelling. Kind of across the board, like you kind of like your Blue Eyed Samurai, has been like massive, like kind of hit. Before that, the kind of Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse, that was I mean, actually, when you look at it as a piece of like art, it's actually really quite some of it's really quite challenging, really quite avant-garde. And you kind of think, wow, that's like kind of coming through into something that's like massively popular, very mainstream. In the West, who would have thought of that? Where most people go, oh, animation, oh, that's cartoons. And it's like, no, it's it's not. It's an art form. Here's why it's an art form. It's a storytelling, medium. And I think that like the growth potential in the West, for that, that type of storytelling is so exciting. And that's really great. I think, you brought up AI. It's Marmite, isn't it? It's really divisive. I think it's exciting, but only if the creative industries are, really careful about it, and because I was thinking about this, and I mean, we've always like, we love like kind of new technologies like kind of coming through. So whether that's like like software or processes or anything like that, really exciting, right? What's the latest thing? Give us that over here. Let's have a go at it. Let's see what we can kind of do about it. And Kev had the same approach, with AI. He thought, this is a tool. It's a tool. And it's he uses it for just getting a lot of like creative ideas down really quickly, and that's because he really understands what it is, and I think that we've got a responsibility to make sure that clients and and people not in the creative industries really understand that the creative process never goes away. So no matter what tools you use, there's the value of that creative process, that thinking, that how do we bring it in, that's something that that the AI doesn't do. Procedurally, fantastic, and it's a tool and we can use it, and we need to kind of understand it, but I think we need to keep communicating the worth of creative development and creative process and thinking, and what we do, and I think it's so important, because you do, sometimes, in what we do, there can be this kind of like, oh, it's time and resources, it's a procedural thing that someone's coming to ask you to do, especially in the motion graphics field, actually, where people, do tend to think, oh, that's, not everybody, but there is a kind of tendency to think, oh, well, that's a procedural, technical, thing. No, we need to keep pushing, how creative, these mediums are, and that's what's kind of important. So I think that AI's exciting from that kind of, if we can make sure that we work that into a creative pipeline, absolutely. But we need to make sure that we keep communicating the value and worth, of, the thinking, the creative, and everything that we do. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. That's always with the AI kind of argument. It's always the way I look at it as well. It's obviously a tool to be used. It's great, and you can do the practical and technical side of certain things, but there's the creativity side of it is I think when if you can have that creativity and then you can put that into AI tools, that's when you can actually make use of it and actually get some interesting things. But you're right, that's the kind of message I think that needs to be put out there. And the adult animation side of things is also quite interesting. That's something that we're quite excited about, from our side of things as well, because we've just started our first sort of adult skewing animated series that we're voice producing, and you can definitely see potential there. I think for audiences are kind of more, larger audiences are kind of buying into that now, I think, and streamers are sort of are backing that. We're seeing other studios that kind of traditionally work in sort of kids animation are sort of testing out that area as well.
Yeah, the AI thing's really interesting. I think I notice even in some tools that I use, it's totally used in that way. It's an aid for us to be able to either be more efficient in what we're doing, or it can even generate ideas that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. But yeah, I think working alongside it as opposed to being terrified that it's going to take everyone's livelihood away from them is a better mindset to have.
I did wonder if it's like, if they'd called it something else. Would that have made a difference? Because it's something that's maybe a wee bit more accurate in and how kind of we use it, rather than everyone, oh my God, Skynet, that's it, don't.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's terrifying when you see all these companies coming out with their bots now as well.
Oh, I know.
It's like, get one of these for your house.
Yeah. Was it Figure One or something?
Yeah.
That OpenAI's brought out? That's mad. Absolute madness. I'd be terrified to have one of those.
Boston Dynamics, those videos, you watch one of them and it's like, oh, here's this guy and he's kicking it, and you're like, can you just stop kicking that, because it's going to remember,
it's going to come back for you. That's the weirdest thing about the Boston Dynamics videos. They're all just videos of them kicking the shit out of robots.
that they've not
That's all
turned
you ever
on
see.
yet.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't kick it when it's on, but I'll not tell anyone that.
Biggest challenges that you've encountered as a studio, and how have Revenant overcome them? So I always love to kind of look at the challenges that studios have had. So again, whether that's kind of in recent moves into games, or into themed entertainment, that'd be quite interesting to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say, oh, we don't, yes, everything's always rosy, everything's always great. You don't have like kind of challenges, and yeah, I mean, every day, you are, and anybody says that you don't is telling porcupines. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, biggest challenges are, I mean, the nature of the world at the moment in terms of just like the kind of financial situations, and and being affected by everything from writer strikes to to the actor strikes. That had a kind of knock-on effect for certain aspects of the kind of industry. Broadcast television is having an incredibly difficult time at the moment, for all sorts of like kind of reasons. And that's like kind of really tricky. The games industry's had its own wee kind of scare point, like kind of post-COVID kind of scare point. So we're just navigating that at the moment. I think the way that we look at it in the same way as we did, when COVID hit, which was the biggest challenge anybody had kind of faced, is just to look at like where are the opportunities. Like first of all, how do we make sure in the short term we're going to be all right here, but in the mid to longer term, how do we get the best advantage out of this situation? How do we kind of keep ourselves kind of protected? And one of the ways that we did do that was diversify in different sectors. So it's one of the reasons why we don't want to just have all our eggs in one basket. For creative reasons, because I think like when you're doing like cross sector work, I think it's it gives you a wider vision and perspective, and and input. Lots of input's great, lots of different perspectives are brilliant. But it also, like kind of from a like studio business strategy position, does hopefully insulate you a wee bit. So if all of a sudden, and it can happen, like as we know that like all the work drops out of like one sector, you can then look to other sectors, and you can also be strategizing as much as you can in today's age about where is growth happening. I mean, themed entertainment's a really great example of that. Obviously, all of that just went for COVID for obvious reasons, but it's coming out of COVID, and just because of the nature of it, it's actually really, really busy at the moment because everybody's now, experiential again. We can start mixing. We've got, we're, the theme parks, and like, we're, really behind, and it's like, push, 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 which is really interesting. And then, the games industry, going through, what is quite a turbulent time, for them, and just having a wee look at, how do we fit into that? How can we, make a strategy that works within, what's kind of going on at the moment. So yeah, I think it's just, it's looking at lots of different angles, and just seeing how you can, best insulate, yourself, but also, actually make the best of kind of what's going on at the moment. Don't hide under a blanket as much as like the temptation is always there. If if things are are incredibly challenging, like the temptation is to like just like assume the ostrich position and just just like, right, okay, well, just wait till this storm blows over. I think don't do that. You need to be quite brave and face it and say, right, okay, well, this is happening. How's that going to affect us? What can we do? to kind of make sure that we're going to be okay and making the best of it, and and still like kind of growing, and how do we shift strategy to to kind of respond to that. And the challenges should make you stronger. If you can navigate those strategies, because it gives you confidence. It gives you more confidence, because ultimately a lot of business is about taking risks. Every day is about taking risks, because I can't, I don't have a crystal ball for 5 years, 10 years, but I can say, based on what's happened previously, and what I know about what's going on at the moment, I think that this is where we're going to get to. This is a realistic goal for us in 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. But you never know that for sure. That's not a definite. So you're going to have to take a risk. You're rolling the dice at some point, and I think you have to make your peace with that, and you have to be you have to take risks. You just have to do that, and you have to also know that some things will pay off and some things won't. And plan for that in the best way. So if you're going to make, I don't know, like 2 really risky moves, make sure you're making a few less risky ones that are going to make sure you keep the lights on, and that in the background, and that you're not being completely silly.
Completely wild.
Yeah.
That's the fun part, though, isn't it? I hate the safe part.
Now, you've always been really good at kind of identifying that as well, like when to move and when to pivot.
Yeah.
Although we've kind of got a niche of voice production for animation initially, but noticing when there was going to be a boom for English dubbing, which then has kind of subsided a wee bit, but as we moved from that into games, which served as well last year when the animation industry had kind of really dipped quite a bit. And yeah, I feel like the experience from all these different sectors all kind of merge together and just increase your knowledge of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is that that kind of being brave enough, isn't it, to pivot and kind of know when to do that, and yeah, I suppose it's like that kind of risk taking is key, isn't it, if you want to kind of push forward and grow.
Yeah, totally. It was like didn't know they were really doing any UK English dubs, and you were like, I think we should go to LA and speak to Netflix about doing some English dubs.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, right, okay.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, we're like the second studio in the UK
Aye, that's right.
to do it.
I was talking about that actually in another podcast last week, and that was I don't know how we found out about that. I must have been signed up to some sort of, I must have found it on LinkedIn or something, and then you can apply to Netflix to kind of be interested in that sort of partnership program. So I sat up and I filled out the application. It was massive. It was like 40 pages. And then never gave it any other thought. And then they kind of emailed everybody and were like, oh, we're doing the launch party for this new dubbing program. The UK launch party will be in London on this date. I was like, oh, cool. I'll maybe just go down, and went down to it. Just myself. And then, that way where you walk into these massive sort of networking things in London, everybody knows who each other is.
Like,
you're just the sort of random Scottish guy. So just walked around the room like 6 times, drank about 5 beers. I was like, okay, patching this. And then just as I was leaving, bumped into a guy I'd met at, like, I don't know, Children's Media Conference or something like that. And he was like, oh, I need to introduce you to Joe, who set up this program. So he took me out into this wee balcony and introduced me to this guy, and he was like, oh yeah, how's it going? And so he was like, yeah, we might need to do like English dubbing for animation. Is that something you can do? I was like, yeah, we that's like our thing, is this animation voices. He's like, cool, that would be good. We should try and like catch up about it. I was like, well, I'll be in LA next month if I could swing by Netflix's offices. He's like, yeah, let's do that. So then left, text Phil, was like, book a flight to LA. We're going out to LA.
I skipped the 40 pages in the London thing. I was like, I'm going to LA. That sounds good.
That sounds like a win-win, Phil.
Yeah, it's great.
So just before we kind of wrap up then, Pam, I was kind of going to ask you about, future, like what you're excited about for Revenant kind of going forward in terms of, are you looking at IP, stuff like that? What's in terms of like the creative side of things, what's exciting for the studio going forward?
So we are developing some of our own IP, which is really exciting. And yeah, I love that. We've always done creative development studio projects, like since since the beginning, just to kind of really push the team and use them as training exercises and ways to kind of push kind of creative styles and processes and techniques and all that kind of thing. But yeah, recently we kind of thought, do you know what, we'd really like to push the story and character angle, and actually just kind of get some of our own kind of IP kind of going. So that's been developed. That's really exciting. Really exciting. We're also doing it feels like over the last few years there's there's lots of firsts, that kind of always kind of come through. So we're doing some in-game cinematics, and technically that's our first in-game cinematics. So we're doing that. We're doing that project at the moment for a new game that's coming out this year, which is incredibly exciting. And yeah, there's all sorts of other techniques and processes that we're really excited about. So as the studio is growing, there's lots of kind of creative pipelines that we've started and we've created, and then we're kind of building on them, and lots of stuff in facial animation and groom and stylization and and just kind of really kind of pushing the kind of team. So that's really exciting, and just gets me gets all the kind of the blood pumping and the juices flowing and everything. I just can't really wait to get out and kind of tell clients about that and sell that and and see where the our own IP goes as well, which would be absolutely kind of wonderful to kind of get out there. So yeah, no, it's cool. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. Looking forward to seeing what comes next. So just to kind of finish off then, Pam, we always ask our guests the same question, and I'm going to kind of read this out because I can never phrase it properly and I just end up sort of babbling on. So I want to kind of just dive into the storytelling aspect a little bit more. So storytelling is kind of at the heart of everything we do at Big Mouth Audio, and what we believe is that great stories create lasting memories and shape our experiences. So I'm interested to know if you could share with us a particular story, whether that's like a film, a game, a book, whatever it might be, that's had a significant impact on you, or left you with just a great memory.
I mean, there's loads and kind of different in each of those. So probably we've been talking about games, so probably games wise, I mean, I am that kind of generation, that kind of got the first game consoles. So so I think my first games console was a Mega Drive. So I've played games from when I was 8. That's just love games. And I think probably kind of going through from early on, I think probably the Legend of Zelda series is something that's always kind of stayed with me for lots of reasons. I'm absolutely fascinated by Japanese culture and Japanese storytelling, and and their craft, and design, and all of that. And I think even before I realised, even when I was too young to realise that that's what I was kind of looking at, those games really kind of spoke to me, and have right up till now. I've played all the all the latest ones. So so yeah, that from that perspective, and probably like films wise, like because I'm, I did a film and media degree, so I think I go right back and I always say, and it's I love like Hitchcock. That like all the Hitchcock films always like kind of like stayed with me. So, and like even like one of the more like the most populist ones probably like North by Northwest, and it's always kind of really like kind of affected the way that I kind of look at things. And I always say like look at that. I mean, I think it was like 1958. I'm going to say that like kind of came out, and if you look at that, in terms of the storytelling, but the cameras, and the kind of technique, and you kind of look at it and you go, look at those cameras, that's like, it's so modern. It's probably like the template for all your like kind of like modern espionage, like kind of, thriller movies that have came, since. Like all this kind of like looking at really interesting like kind of camera work. And that stayed with me because of like, just and what we do, and like cameras are so important. You know what I mean? It's like, we can put a camera wherever you want that camera to go, but actually, you're kind of looking at conventions and and storytelling, and it's such a big big important like kind of piece. But yeah, so those from from those two different areas probably. Yeah, and like I can't agree with that more. It's all about storytelling, all about storytelling. And I think that's where that kind of like creative input is so important, because if you're developing anything, whether it's a feature film, animation, and it's got different like kind of elements in it, whether it's like wee bits of motion graphics or it's this or that or the other, it's got to all work for the story. If it doesn't, if it just is there to be pretty, or it's not, then it's not. It's what is it doing? Why is it even there? It's like that. There's got to be a reason. If it's there, if it's pretty, and there's a reason for that within the story context, absolutely fine. And that's why like all the like the creative like development work, you see it when that final piece comes out, because it all lends itself to the telling of the story. Why is that there? There's a reason why, and there should be a reason why every piece of that is there, and why it looks a certain way, and why it's a certain colour, and why this camera is in this position, and why we're focusing on this aspect, why the character looks like that, why they're wearing whatever they're wearing. That's what really fascinates me, and I think like it's what excites me about what we do. Much more than I loved the work that I did in TV and film, but like I said at the beginning, I do get quite, I get bored quite quickly, and there was too many confines to that. There's too many restrictions, to it. In what we do, there are no restrictions. And it's it's similar, like for your guys as well. I adore like kind of sounds, and I've and like I've always like said it, because it's the next dimension, especially in what we do, because we create all that, but there is nothing there. It's like so sound has to then build that out. And that's like that's fascinating, because that's like a whole like like kind of different landscape that you've got complete control over, to do whatever you want, and and to kind of push that story forward in whatever way you want it, and that's so exciting. And nothing else can kind of compare to it, really.
Yeah, I love that quote of the sound is 50% of the production, 50% of the story, but not 50% of the budget.
I know. Tell me about
it. That's a fantastic place to leave it off then, Pam. So
you might like that one, Steve.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was great.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can catch up again soon.
Awesome.
In person.
Awesome. That would be brilliant. Really nice to see you both again. Take care.